Alright, you need to stop. I don't know who's doing this, but yeah, it was funny for a little bit. It truly was. You know, I got my chuckles, I got my laughs, but it's a lot like this one job I had. So the guy comes up to me, he's like, hey, you want more chips? I'm like, yeah, of course. And he smashes my bag of chips. He's like, no, you got more chips. And yeah, that was a little bit funny the first time it happened, but then every time he walked past my bag of chips, he'd be like, more chips! And smash my bag. And it escalated, and next thing you know, I was feeding him X-Lax chocolate and stuffing his jelly donut with lithium grease. The outcome is just bad. So who's ever given these ridiculous politicians bad dope, please stop. And if you're the politician watching this, there's a plug right in Washington. He goes by the name of Hunter. I can't think of his last name, but apparently he's got the good stuff. So talk to him. Who's ever serving you, they're giving you bad stuff. And yeah, I'll admit, it was funny watching you on TV and throw out these ridiculous bills. The humor was there. It was funny a little bit, but it's getting old. Especially the bill, H.R. 8714. I mean, again, the humor was there, but I've seen this joke so many times, it's just plain getting old. Let's talk about this. So what we're talking about specifically is the original bill was talking about 1,000% tax. So, okay, so 1,000% didn't go anywhere, obviously, because that violates like a ridiculous amount of laws. So they went to 20%. So the first thing that you need to look at is Murdoch versus Pennsylvania. In that particular Supreme Court decision, it was affirmed, no, you cannot tax a right. Anything protected by the Constitution cannot be taxed, whether that's religion, firearms accessories, ammunition, the free speech, can't be taxed. And there's a whole bunch of other decisions backing this up and things affirming this, but that's the big one, Murdoch versus Pennsylvania. Okay, so now you need the ability to pay the tax. So to charge 1,000% tax on, I don't know, say a $500 item, assuming the purchaser of that particular item is buying a $500 item because that's about the max of their budget, how do they have the ability to pay that tax? Moving on. You can't make a tax a penalty. You cannot specifically make a tax to penalize someone. A tax must be a bona fide tax. There's no getting around that. So, because the tax rate of even 20% is unusually high when typical sales tax is 5.5%, that would be a penalty. Now you're probably wondering like, hey CRS, I mean, doesn't this kind of make the NFA unconstitutional? You know, like pushing away the Second Amendment. Just looking at tax laws, it seems pretty unconstitutional. You are correct. First off, a $200 tax. Okay, sounds reasonable, but you're not allowed to pay that tax. So it is no longer a tax. It is a penalty. You can't make a tax a penalty. So they would either have to rewrite the NFA and change that and not make it a tax and do something else, or it doesn't stand. Now the next one. You can't tax a right. Murdoch versus Pennsylvania. Well, an NFA tax is a direct tax on the right to possess an NFA item. NFA items are protected by the Constitution. That can't exist. That can't stand. The NFA is, again, found unconstitutional. The next thing, failure to pay a tax has a maximum penalty of 25%. Now, I'll be the first one to admit it. My math isn't the strongest. You know, I wasn't a straight A student in math. However, $200 is the tax. 25% of 200, I'm like 99% sure, doesn't equal 250,000. So how does a maximum tax penalty of 25% when you have a $200 tax equal $250,000? That's crazy. That's completely ridiculous. Okay, so let's move on from there. Let's push tax law aside. All right, so first off, it violates the Second Amendment. Right here, shall not be infringed. Remember, this is a document from the people to the government, putting restrictions on the government. Nowhere in there does it say anything at all that there's an exception to any sort of law made around firearms. It says shall not be infringed. There's no special articles or anything attached to this giving them the power to restrict firearms or firearms accessories or ammunition in any way, shape, or form. Alright, so what about the 8th Amendment? This applies particular to the NFA. The 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. So, if your typical tax penalty is 25%, and they're putting a fine on there of $250,000 and 10 years in prison over a $200 tax, $200. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've spent more than $200 on Perv Row on more than one occasion. So a tax as small as $200 warrants a fine of $250,000 and 10 years in prison? Kind of seems like cruel and unusual punishment if you ask me. And then you got the 14th Amendment. Now that itself is really bad, because the 14th Amendment not only talks about anybody that has a rebellion against the Constitution. Yes, that includes all anti-gun groups are not eligible for office. That's terrible. Any anti-gun group cannot run for office. Any senator that goes against the Constitution, again, the Second Amendment, is not eligible for office. So let's really just dig down and get right in there and look at the unconstitutionality of the NFA under the 14th Amendment. The whole idea behind the 14th Amendment is to give equal protection of the law to every American citizen. That will allow that there will be no exceptions to the law, and it will put nobody above the law. For example, say Mr. CRS here ran for president, he became president. I can't make a law saying that nobody's allowed to run for president and then carve an exception out for myself. Basically locking me in the seat of office, making me a dictator. Makes sense, right? Well, when you apply it to the NFA, because they carve out exceptions for military personnel, law enforcement officers, or SOT holders, that makes it unconstitutional. The only way, with the 14th Amendment, the NFA could remain constitutional is if that was applied equally across the board. It doesn't matter if you're in the military, it doesn't matter if you're a police officer, and it doesn't matter if you have an SOT. Your machine gun must be made before 1986, and you must pay $200 for each and every single one of them. Or, the alternative, which I think they should go with, is the protections carved out for police officers, military, or SOT holders is applied equally across the board. Every United States of America citizen is afforded the same protections under the law as those particular members of the government. And that would be the fair way to do it. That would be the only way the NFA could stand and be constitutional. The 14th Amendment makes the NFA unconstitutional. So not only does it violate the Second Amendment, we're not even going to get into the litany of other amendments it also violates. And now I made a post about this, but I want to bring it up again. Do not forget, you guys are the good guys. They are knowingly and willfully violating the Constitution and breaking the law. You are adhering to it. You are not the bad guy. Now, I know there's a lot of indoctrination and information and propaganda that tries to convince you that you're the bad guy. But you need to remember, you are the good guy. You are the one that is following the Constitution. They're the ones that are violating it. Don't forget that. I know that it's been a hard road and we've had a lot of battles and it's just draining. But remember, you are the good guy. You are fighting for what's right. Now, so what do we do about this? Because watching judges especially fly in the face of Bruen, we're not even talking about Miller, we're not talking about Heller, all these Supreme Court decisions reaffirming the NFA and gun laws are unconstitutional, but yet justices will still rule against these reaffirmed decisions. I mean, we already knew it. I mean, it's pretty hard to argue with the Second Amendment, but the Supreme Court has reaffirmed it over and over and over and over again. And then Bruen happened, which made it next to impossible for a gun law to stand, because in Bruen they said you can't use a two-step process anymore. Before, they would look at this law and they'd be like, yes, this is unconstitutional. However, weighing it on public interest, we're going to let it stand. Bruen said you can't do that anymore. You can only use text, tradition, and history. That's it. So how do we take care of this? Well, I believe the first step would be letting justices know what they're doing is illegal. How you would file this is Title 18, Section 242. This is it right here. Plain English. You can file this on like FBI tip lines, ATF tip lines, anywhere you want. Just because remember, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if you don't make any noise, nothing's going to happen. And I know it's silly, filing these against justices, you probably won't get any sort of response. But again, it's way better than not doing nothing. If you do nothing, nothing will change. And this is something you can do legally from your house. There's no repercussions against it. You're just reporting that, hey, this particular person, whether that's a congressman, a district attorney, a justice, is violating and withholding my rights. Here's, again, the actual section right there. And you just report it. Sooner or later, one of these cases are going to be picked up. And once one person of authority goes down, it's going to change things. And this isn't some irrelevant act or title that has never been used. You can just type it into Google and see the cases. Typically, this is used against like probation officers, police officers, stuff like that. Justices and DAs and that have been left out, but it's time to change that. It's time to wrap them in. They need to follow the Constitution. They can't willfully and knowingly break the law without repercussions. And again, you are the good guy. You're the one that's following the Constitution. They're the one that's not. Don't forget that. Don't get in your head and convince yourself you're doing something wrong. Anyway, kind of sorry this video just went off in a bunch of different directions, but that's just something to deal with on my channel. My viewers are aware of this. They pretty much deal with it. If you'd like to help support the channel, I got my Patreon right there. I also have affiliate links in the description down below. Just by clicking on that particular link, that's all you got to do is just click on it. Nothing more. Just click on it and do the Amazon shopping you were already going to do anyway. And a little kickback for it because you came there off my channel. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.